Why do high schoolers on TV look like models in their mid-20s? Why are stories about adolescence now drenched in hyper-glamorous trauma, drug use, and cinematic lighting that would feel more at home in an indie film than a school hallway? Shows like Euphoria, Riverdale, 13 Reasons Why, and Elite have become cultural staples. But there is a growing disconnect between how teenagers are portrayed on screen and what real teenage life actually looks like. So, what happens when we start viewing adolescence through an adult, stylized lens? One of the first things you notice when watching teen shows today is that the actors playing these characters are often well into their 20s. Zendaya was 22 when she began playing Rue in Euphoria. The cast of Riverdale, most of them were in their mid to late 20s when the show started. In Pretty Little Liars, Lucy Hale was 21 playing a 16-year-old, and Sasha Peters was only 12 when she filmed scenes that were supposed to be seductive and manipulative. So, why does Hollywood keep doing this? Well, the answer is both practical and psychological. Older actors are legally easier to work with. They don't have the same restrictions around working hours or needing on-set schooling. But more importantly, casting older actors shapes how we, the audience, perceive adolescence itself. The message becomes clear. To be a desirable teenager, you have to look like a grown adult. Flawless skin, perfect hair, gym-toned bodies. This sets an unattainable standard, especially for real-life teens who are still growing into themselves. Modern teen dramas don't just cast adults, they frame adolescence as an aesthetic. Think of the saturated dreamlike visuals of Euphoria. Every party is lit like a music video. Every heartbreak is shot like a perfume ad. Even trauma is beautiful. Rue's withdrawal sequence is edited like an experimental short film. In Elite, even murders and betrayals are followed by fashion shows and love triangles. These shows glamorize dysfunction and chaos, packaging them as high drama with a glossy finish. It's not that young people don't experience pain or complexity, but the way these stories are told prioritizes style over realism. We are not just watching teenagers suffer, we are watching them do it while wearing designer outfits and speaking in Instagram captions. And in doing so, the shows become less about the teenage experience and more about how adulthood remembers adolescence. Intensely, romantically, and with a lot of filters. There's a huge cultural shift in how trauma is portrayed in teen media. Early 2000s shows like Degrassi or My So-Called Life tackled heavy topics like abuse, self-harm, and addiction, but they remained grounded. The trauma felt uncomfortable, but real. Now, shows like 13 Reasons Why or Euphoria still tackle those same themes, but they often do so in a way that's performative. Trauma becomes the hook, the plot engine, the thing that keeps you binging. And there's danger in that. When trauma is aestheticized, it can desensitize audiences. Self-destruction becomes visually stunning. Depression is often framed as a character quirk rather than a mental health crisis. Instead of inspiring empathy or awareness, these stories risk normalizing extreme behavior, or worse, making it aspirational. This isn't to say that creators shouldn't portray hard realities, but when trauma becomes a plot device first and a human experience second, it distorts how viewers, especially younger ones, understand themselves and their struggles. Many of these shows aren't really written for teens anyways. They're written by adults trying to recreate their own past or comment on the present. This results in a sort of adult fantasy of what teenage life is like. In Riverdale, teenagers are detectives, gang members, musicians, and entrepreneurs all at once. In Gossip Girl, especially the reboot, Teen drama is just an entry point to discussions of wealth, power, and sex that feel more like a reboot of Succession than a high school soap. In trying to make adolescence exciting, marketable, and binge-worthy, we lose sight of what makes the teenage years unique. Awkwardness, confusion, quiet rebellion, and small, intimate moments. Instead, the characters are hyper-articulate, hypersexual, and often way too emotionally mature for 16-year-olds. This creates a kind of cultural feedback loop. Young people begin to emulate these characters, dressing and acting older, while older audiences project their nostalgia onto these fictional teens. The line between fiction and reality gets blurry. So, how does this all affect real-life teenagers anyways? Well, it does so in a few ways. First, body image issues. Constantly seeing quote-unquote teens who look like they've walked off a runway can contribute to disordered eating and body dysmorphia. Younger viewers might also feel pressure to grow up faster, like experimenting more with sex, drugs, or adopting a jaded persona. And lastly, watching glamorized versions of trauma can sometimes lead to the belief that suffering is cool or edgy, rather than something to seek help for. Social media amplifies this tenfold. TikTok and Instagram are flooded with teens replicating Euphoria makeup, Riverdale aesthetics, and even romanticizing breakdowns. The boundaries between self-expression and self-harm get dangerously thin when pain is made aesthetic. This is not about canceling these shows. In many ways, they're brilliantly made. Euphoria has stellar cinematography and acting. Sex Education offers a refreshing balance of humor, sex positivity, and awkwardness. But we need more shows that reflect adolescence honestly. Shows like Heartstopper, Everything Sucks, and even older series like Freaks and Geeks stand out because they prioritize emotional truth over visual spectacle. The characters are messy, insecure, and relatable, not flawless adult fantasies. They remind us that coming of age is not just about trauma, rebellion, or sex. It's also about discovery, first friendships, boredom, and hope. When teen shows stop looking like real teenagers, they stop speaking to real teenage experiences. Casting 25-year-olds and glamorizing trauma might make for addictive TV, but it risks warping how we understand youth itself. As viewers, it's important to recognize the difference between stylized fiction and reality, and as creators, it's worth asking, what are we teaching the next generation about themselves? Are we showing them who they are, or who we want them to be?